Okie dokie. Oh, gotta kill the music. I'm a professional. Hey there, folks. I'm Michael Henderson, better known as Rel. And let me get my co-host up on screen. I'm the solo author on Distal, a new D20 fantasy system focused on hardships, not heroes. I have with me today a longtime friend and someone who's playtested Distal since the earliest days. Steph, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Stephanie Ann Roy. I'm an entrepreneur, martial artist, and a lover of TTRPGs. And I'm really excited to get to talk about the evolution of Distal. And then, quick shameless plug, I also recently released a book called The Spiral, and you can find it at spiraluplife.com. Has nothing to do with TTRPGs, so that's the last I'll mention it. But yeah, now I could jump into some Distal talk today, and I'm excited to hear, from the community and what questions they still have. But we had a couple of topics that we thought would be fun to start with. So today we're going to be talking about the role of consequence in Distal, which is one of the things that makes it unique, especially divergent from D&D 5e, I think. And then we're also going to be looking at the evolution of the character sheet, because that design and formatting really does have a decent influence on gameplay. The number of times that I've made my own character sheet or found a redesigned one online or used index cards because the character sheet given to you by Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinders just, I don't know, could be better. And then finally we're going to look a little bit, get a preview about the Alpha 6 packet that is coming out next week. I should know this, right? Next week?
Yes, it'll be on the
27th?
27th. 27th.
Yes, got it.
I
Yeah.
mean, hopefully. I'm working my balls off trying to get it all done. So hopefully.
Awesome. Very cool. Hello, Henry.
Anyway.
All right, so we're starting off with the role of consequence. So, Michael, just to kind of kick off the conversation, it just why is the way that it's done in 5e unsatisfactory? What really compelled you to weave consequences into Distal in the way that you have?
Yeah, so just for a little bit more context for everybody watching, the kind of the drive of Distal's like unifying theme is that it's intended to really bring back that old school sort of hero arc. So when you think about Lord of the Rings and people who are overcoming difficult odds in spite of the circumstances, right? They don't know that they don't get a full rest before they start combat for the day. It's like they got to deal with it. If you see just how utterly beaten and destroyed Frodo is just after having undergone that journey, like that's what I think makes a hero, and we've kind of gotten away from it with games that are very. I almost equate them more like power fantasy than heroic fantasy, where they're uh, like you're kicking down the doors and you're flinging spells and everything kind of goes your way, and then you burn down a whole orphanage with a fireball spell and don't really care about the consequences. And that's not the experience that I'm really looking to create. And sometimes it takes making a game to set the setting, like the box that you're supposed to be working in, because a lot of the mechanics in the game kind of point you toward the game's themes. You can always have a harder setting in 5e, and you can always homebrew mechanics in 5e, but like inherently, unless you're chopping out a lot of those additional rules or just kind of making things more gritty, you're starting from a place that it's almost self-sabotaging. Or rather, I should say that there's like a lot of work that needs to go into creating an experience that is different as a baseline. So, uh, and it's also about giving permission as well. So GMs will often have the like either you have to play by the rules, or you maybe you have a GM that is very fluid and they kind of just like do whatever. There's so many different types of GMing styles that when you're at a table and you desire a specific experience. For me, it's like I want you to beat the crap out of my character because I want my triumph to feel earned. I want my choices to have consequences, and consequences invoke the meaning, or rather, add weight to the meaning of those actions. So, for me, giving a GM not only, I guess, not even just permission, but also like, hey, do this, make the game difficult because that's what propels your characters forward. That's the experience that I was looking to create with Distal.
Yeah, and I think it's also guidelines on how to do it too without overdoing
Yeah.
it. Like the number of like am I the a-hole type posts that I see on D&D subreddits of people that are DMs, GMs that they felt like their player needed some kind of consequence because of the way they'd been behaving at the table. Thank you. I'm so big compared to you. It's just my camera setup. But yeah, so the way their player was behaving at the table, the DM felt like a natural consequence was in order, but then figuring out what's appropriate and just all the table dynamics. So this kind of builds it in so that you get them thinking. And I remember when we had our family education empowerment and entertainment center open in Quester's Way, um, one of the programs that surprised us was Dungeons and Dragons, and we had teen programs going where kids would come in and play, and that element of consequence was really healthy for them to be able to kind of experiment. So you've got teenagers, some of them on the spectrum, that are just they're just doing stuff. And then even within the realm of D&D, there was this opportunity for cause and effect of like, yeah, if you just go murder hobo, it's gonna mess things up. So the way this is built into the game, I feel like it's gonna help encourage these critical thinking skills that could result in. So there's always the story part of it, the having fun. It is a game, the social aspect, but the way I've no, the way that the thing that's always excited me the most about D&D or just tabletop games in general is this opportunity to kind of practice and play with personal growth and development a little
Oh,
bit.
for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like, I'll take on a character that has aspects that I want to work on. So, like, if I want to work on being more patient, I'll make a character that's supposed to be all patient so I can practice it. So I think that the critical thinking skills that this will encourage people to have to think through is there's potential benefit outside of just the game.
Right. I mean, just consider your actions. And in order to do that, you kind of have to slow things down a little bit too. So adding more tripwires kind of allows you to consider the things that you're doing more often. I mean, and that's communication as well. Like if you're just going, you don't consider like the emotional state of the end of the person, that sort of thing, then it's very easy to kind of fall afoul of that. And I think the working on different aspects of your character, I've definitely felt that too. In I've wanted to like I feel very uncomfortable doing voices, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on voices, but when you can go into it and say like, okay, this is what I want to try to do, I it's just like learning to set boundaries, or not boundaries, maybe like I guess goals for a session, or like an experience is healthy too. And anytime that you can make people work together to like figure out what they want, what they're all looking to get out of an experience, is an important part to creating like a successful game in general. I mean, or I would say that often tables fall apart because there's like a mismatch of what people are looking for. So a lot of distils are designed like very intentionally tries to get everybody talking to one another. Oh, you're muted, Steph.
Sorry, I didn't want people to hear me chugging my water. We should probably look at some more specific examples of what we're talking about. So to start kind of like hyper specific, the Ember Gut and the Ferryman are two classes that definitely have trade-offs. So, and we touched on this in last week's stream, but for people that weren't around last time, can you briefly go over kind of the trade-offs? Just in summary that you experience just, even just with the class that you pick.
Sure. Yeah. So the Ember Gut is it's a kind of like a pyromaniac, sort of warlock esque class, to where they are pacted with an entity that is in a different plane, and you draw your power from that entity. The way that so like you get some magic to use, but you can also kind of like deep or delve deeper into that well by creating a bargain. So you offer up a part of yourself temporarily to this entity, and they bestow additional spell slots, mana, that sort of thing, upon you, so that you can cast more spells. So it's a trade-off that you have to think about making. Like, when is the right time to do that? What are the repercussions going to be if I do? So we have different attributes in the game: strength, dexterity, fortitude, intelligence, wisdom. And how a bargain works is that once per day, you can at any point speak telepathically to your pacted entity and offer up one of your attributes. So if it's like, okay, I give you my strength, you, like the Ember Gut, would then like lose all of your strength, and then more so, like it goes into a negative, like you receive a penalty. You have no strength. You have -2 strength even, but you gain however many like uses of spells that you had equivalent to your strength, or equivalent to the original stat of it. So you need to decide, like, how much does that matter? Like, if you're wearing equipment that requires strength to use, and you burn it all down, then you're not going to be able to wear that equipment. There's like other considerations as well, like how much do you need to be protected from a fall? Well, that's your dexterity. How often do you want to recover from, like, what happens if you fall on the ground and you're going through a death cycle? Then that fortitude factors into that. So you need to figure out what to give up, and whether or not it's worth doing that. And that pushes you further. So it's not the baseline. It allows you to kind of dig deeper. So things like that. The Ferryman, just as another example, is a class that plays a lot with death, in that they gain more power the more times they have a brush with death. And death in Distal is, if you accrue too many death marks, then you die permanently. You're done. So walking this line between power and staying alive is like one of those trade-offs that you need to consider. Like, you need it adds weight to the decisions that you make, and that's a lot of what makes Distal.
Yeah. Now, you had said that the whole premise behind this game is that it's merciless. There's hardships, not heroes, meaningful stakes, and with Alpha Packet 6, you've built in hardship to the progression. So how is that working? Because we haven't play tested that yet.
Right. Actually, that's an Alpha 5 too.
It is an Alpha 5. All
yeah,
right.
It is an Alpha 5. But it's been a long time since we've sat down for a game. But so how you gain experience, essentially, in this game are by enduring trials. So this is another one of those things where the GM needs to make your life a little bit difficult, or rather give you opportunities for the table to, like, make hard decisions, take on difficult challenges. And so like experiences, or rather trials, are experiences, not experience points necessarily. They function very similarly, but the difference is that you can gain trials as you undergo them. So you don't need to, it's not about beating the boss necessarily. It might just be about doing battle with the boss and getting your butt kicked. When you fall over and you have a near death experience, that constitutes probably as a trial. So a lot of it is left up to GM's discretion, but the advice is to like give them at least one mark each session, which also means like give your characters something difficult to overcome in each session. And it kind of hopefully, and we'll have to see. Hopefully, it kind of gives the gears the player mindset toward figuring out what they need to, or rather, being willing to immerse themselves in situations that might not have a clear outcome or a right or wrong answer. Sometimes it's about just like getting in the mess and seeing what happens. And that's another experience that I would like to see more of, just compared to like Dungeons and Dragons.
Cool. Yeah, and then we did have a question before we get to that. I thought I thought it would be good to go over like the idea of permanent scars too, and just briefly, and death marks, because I think that that may come up in the answer to the question.
For sure.
Maybe it might be relevant. So that's the one other really big like consequence thing of the permanent scars. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so death marks are a core mechanic in Distal, where each character they have a fair amount of death marks that they can accrue, but you accrue one if you fall to 0 health, and for every round that you stay down, you continue to accrue them until you're stabilized, and those don't go away. So as time passes and you get knocked over, you'll continue to like eventually reach the end of your life. But before then, kind of during that process, every time that you gain a death mark, you also have to tick off a skill that you know. So if you have 4 points into stealth and you fell over for 2 rounds, you might consider crossing off 2 of those pips in stealth. That drops your bonus down to a +2, but you translate that into like, what did death take from you? You maybe you just have like a limp now, and you can't sneak around as easily as you used to be able to, or maybe like your perception gets knocked down because you now have a scar that just like took out one of your eyes, or never healed right. So we charge the player with narratively coming up with the reasoning for it, and it allows like you also get to decide which skills you mark down. So there's kind of this struggle too of trying not to fall over, but if you do, like, keep pushing ahead, because you can always gain new skills and learn new learn new skills and kind of practice them to increase them, aside from the ones that have been ticked off. So even finding new ways to bolster your capacities can like shift your character over time into like a different role that you didn't know that they would become. And then on top of that, when you do tick off a pip from a skill, you also gain additional health, or additional maximum health, so that falling over the next time, much like scar tissue deadens the feeling to that area of your body, you become a little bit more resilient to death. So that's death marks in a nutshell. And the game is very much like, ablate the damage before it gets to you. Like, position yourself tactically. Don't get hit if you can help it. At the same time, it's not a gritty setting or like a grim dark setting. You're not going to die super quick. It's very much about trying to create that heroic story arc where you endure challenge over time and become something different at the end of it.
Yeah, no, and I am reflecting on we have a guest star with us. But I am reflecting on the games we played in the past. I think the very first game I ever played with you, way back, probably 3.5 or 4. I forget which one we were playing.
You're
You
gonna talk
played a
about my monk with no arm?
Yeah, the Kenku monk with missing an arm, and then there's always the story that you'll never live down of the the wizard with a -1 to con
Hey,
that
listen.
got immediately nuked within the
Yeah.
first like 30 minutes of playing
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we were
Con is a
starting
dump
at
stat.
first level. Yeah, yeah, you dumped the wrong stat. But you have a history of liking to of prioritizing story over mechanics, over being the superhero. It's more, and I don't know what therapy you need to process that in real life, but in the game, it definitely encourages the exploration of story over just like, speed running the level or min maxing or treating
Right.
it like a video game where you're just trying to
Yeah. Do the
get
most
as
damage,
many
have the
bonus
most
points.
health, have the highest armor, like that sort of thing. Yeah. Story, I feel, is more important because it's more interesting. And I don't think those two are necessarily exclusive. Uh, I've I've had a lot of discussions about actually with John here from Dragon Mind, just kind of about optimization in general. And it's just a topic that has a lot of different facets to it. So ultimately, it comes down to like, what's the experience that you're trying to achieve? Uh, but we can roll right into this question
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, no, I thought this would be good to. Yes, the stream is blessed by Princess Nipples. But I thought it would be good to kind of cover those things before jumping into the question here, because John's asking what the turning point a player has after playing 5e, where they're open to something more challenging. And I don't know. I have a thought in my head, but I'll let you answer first, unless you want me to go first.
Sorry, I blanked out a little bit because it sounded like you said Princess Nipples, which
Oh,
is a very
Nipples
different. It's
with
a
a
very
B.
different character.
Yes, yeah, Princess Nibbles. Okay,
Right.
so
Sorry. I'm in it
so
now. I'm good. Okay, let me read the question.
yeah,
Uh,
the turning point. And I mean, to me, I feel like it's it's when you've played every class, you've optimized every character, and you're just feeling like there are times where I go to create a character in 5e and I'm like, I've done all of these. Like I want something different, and that's
yeah.
where when you're bringing in when you can bring in this uniqueness of only having one arm or you're a limp impeding your stealth or whatever, it does start to create more of a story which allows you to re-fall in love with a character or class that you've played before.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in line with that thinking as well. But for me, it's like I don't even need to have played everything to get bored. Because there's if the mechanics aren't like if the story that you're investing in your character isn't also represented by the mechanics, and I feel like it doesn't have as much weight as it would if like if my character is missing an arm, I don't want them to use a second weapon. Like I want to all of my story to matter in game, and you see that a lot in Distal as well, where like you're getting mechanical benefits based on your background. Like if you grew up a street urchin, like obviously you're better at doing these things. Whereas in D&D, you would just be like, okay, I picked the rogue class because that's the thing that it's going to make me, do the roguey stuff. But that may not necessarily have been what your background actually gave you, like what the experiences taught you. So when it comes to creating a character, I almost feel like they're separate from their class, uh, where you have to represent the person, and then because the class is more like I think in a lot of cases more like the things that you're doing, but like a character can change over time too. Like if you get the crap kicked out of you in actually, so if you grew up like an aristocrat's son and then the second half of your life was destitute and impoverished, like what skill set do you have? It should probably like both of those should be represented in some way. But you're not going to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm a paladin because my first half of my life was this, and then but I multi-class into rogue because of things and stuff. Like I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I'm going in circles a little bit, but the mechanics have to be represented in the narrative for me to feel good about the character that I'm creating.
Yeah, and John did follow up and ask how many players are realistically going to play enough that they'll get to that point. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. But
Well,
that
so
was the first thought that came to mind.
to that point though, I I've always wanted to do this, right? Like you said, you know, we were playing probably 3.5 way back then, and I always want my character to feel the impact of their story via the mechanics of the game. And I've never felt that in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's made me try to like it's been a really interesting obstacle because I have to almost jump through hoops to make my character feel like what they should be. And it honestly, mechanically, it ends up making like you end up making stupid decisions. Where so one of my favorite characters of all time, Quentin, he's a Shadow Knight fighter, and is that what they're called? No, Echo Knight fighter, and then but he also like multi-classed into like one level of druid because of something in his heritage, and mechanically that's it's not very like it doesn't help you in a lot of different ways. So it would have been better for the mechanics to be just kind of like sitting on the character in some way rather than class specific, you know, to kind of justify that story, at least for me.
So how would Distal have solved the? Do you know how Distal would have solved whatever challenge that you faced with Quentin?
Yeah, I think that if I were to recreate Quentin, the okay, well, yeah, hold on, let me just address this. In my particular case, given the level that we were at, it was not helpful because one level, it's like I got Shillelagh as because that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a fighter that would like rip off, you know, table legs, and shank people with stuff. You know, or
Well,
just
then
be
isn't
like
that worth it then?
very scrappy fighter. I mean, I could have made it an unarmed fighter, kind of gone that direction. Instead, it still would have been scrappy. But anyway, point being, the mechanics often don't match up. So, like, if I were to create Quentin in Distal, it would probably be uh, the background that really sells the story portion of it. Like they would have grown up in Urchin because they wouldn't have ended up Cutpurse, which is the Distal's version of a rogue. They would have probably ended up. Actually, they could have ended up Cutpurse because of how I designed it. Like I made it so you can actually be a scrappy rogue, which is very difficult to do in D&D. Yeah, you could be a scrappy tanky rogue. But okay, listen, John. John, yes, you're correct. I get it. I get it. In that particular situation, it was not super helpful. It would have been better to like get a multi attack or something from a level 5 character. Anyway. And this was in Ian's like Curse of Strahd game.
Yes. Incendium DM.
Derailing me.
GM.
Yeah. Can't remember. DM, I think. What are we talking about? It doesn't matter. Let's move on.
Yeah. So I know, but I do like the encouragement that it gives because you had to like you were the exception rather than the rule, basically playing 5e, where you were willing to hinder yourself for the sake of the story, where the rest of us were kind of just being like, we're orphans and that's why we're damaged, you know, like it was
Right.
I feel like it's a lot harder to create some sort of unique element to your character. It was a lot harder to be inspired. You had to out of your own head or your own experience, and it felt like a lot of work to not be tropey. And I think that's where we've already like beat this to death, but in other streams, but that's where the background character creation stuff really helps you break out of the trope mold. Or even if you do end up with a kind of a character that does fall into a trope, I mean, there's a reason that tropes exist, is because there's classic storylines that speak to all of us. But it has enough unique elements that it feels like a new story or a new situation or a new thing to explore.
You know, one of the benefits as well is just the fact that attributes are separate from skills and knowledge. That's one of the things that I think you can, when you make a character, their experiences equate to their skills and knowledge, but not necessarily how they participate in combat and other aspects of the game, which would be, maybe your attributes or your class. So I think in Distal, in that respect, also that's one of the ways that it kind of lends itself to mechanizing the narrative.
Yeah, and does that move us towards the character sheet evolution?
I think so.
Yeah, because that was the other thing that I thought would be fun. And I think when we were getting ready for this, you popped up like one of the older character sheets, but I have like my super old character sheet where it
Mhm.
was just like a really basic outline
Oh
of
wow.
what the different elements were and stuff that was just kind of thrown together as we were starting to play test it. But right from the beginning, like you were talking about um, these attributes were separate from the skills and the knowledge right out of the gate. I'm pretty sure, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And
I,
you ended up making that, right?
I
Because
believe
that.
it was our other playtester,
Oh, okay. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Kitling.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She threw
Right.
that one together for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and then it
wonder.
went in, and that's then there's this one, right, which is the one you had on like
Right.
slideshow.
I'll bring that one up on
Oh, yeah. No,
the
and it's
screen
just
too.
kind of, I don't know. Maybe other people won't care, but I think it's fun to kind of look back on the evolution and the creation process because you really did put a lot. And I feel like, yeah, this one had 2 pages, and I feel like the the first one that you really like mapped out and spent time formatting and stuff is probably a lot closer to like D&D. Like it was still kind of like cramming it all on the page and not really uh adding some of the way that you have it set up now. There's certain things that I'm excited about. So I feel like it's just watching the evolution has been fun.
Yeah. Why don't we kind of walk through some of that evolution now? Because I got some fun stuff to show off. So
Yeah.
so this is the original, like the OG character sheet. It was made in Google Docs. So Google Docs actually super easy to make a character sheet in that way because you just make a whole bunch of blocks that are the same size, and then you have squares. You have a grid to use, and then you take the boxes and you merge them, and then you just you've created a layout, and it's
Oh,
easy
that's
enough.
impressive. I would have never guessed that Google Docs would do this.
Oh
That
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
not
no,
do
it's
it. I
it's
mean,
just
I'm sure, but it's more than I would have expected. I would have never even tried.
right. Yeah, actually, I think I found a tutorial online, and I was like, oh, that's really clever, and it was super easy. It's just you know have this many rows, set the width of all of the cells to 22 or 21, I think is what it ends up being,
So is it a Google
and
Doc or a Google Sheet?
or I'm sorry, Google Sheet.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right. That makes more
yeah, a
sense.
little bit different. No,
Yeah.
so this had what I consider to be a lot of the core elements, and I think it did a pretty decent job overall. Let me see if I can just can I just solo full screen put this up here? I don't think it'll get too much bigger. So I think all of the mechanics are present in this particular sheet, and we used it for quite some time. But to move forward one more, so this is when I took the sheet into Canva. So Canva is a free, like you go online, canva.com,
I
and
love Canva.
it's very useful.
Yeah.
And this was like the first legitimate sheet that I created. And what I did is that I took a screenshot, or I guess just the actual Google Doc printout, and then pasted it in the background, set the transparency low, and then created a bunch of shapes on top of it, and that's what you end up with, where your everything is pretty much in alignment. Canva is really good about giving you guides to make sure that everything lines up, and that was Alpha 1. I'm pretty sure this had I say that it's just for internal testing, but I think there may have been some public testing with this sheet as well. But pretty good start.
Well, yeah, no, because I think this is the one that you had a supporter make like a little app kind of thing that would generate, and it spat out. I have one that's printed out on this format.
Oh, right.
So it must have had some other, it says, yeah, Alpha 1A. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, one of our current audience was working at some point on a character builder for Distal in the early days, just for fun and
Yeah, it was pretty
and to
cool.
help out. Yeah, it is pretty cool. If the alpha ever stops changing, we get to a point where it's solid, and I feel less bad about changing everything all the time, and then him having to do a bunch of work. It'd be cool. It'd be cool to go back and get one done, or get it finished rather. Okay, so if we hold on, Josh is saying that I still have Overwatch ranked. My tags. I hate my life.
That's okay. It's cross promotional.
Well, it can also get you in trouble. Spend it on Twitch. All right. Well, I guess we'll suck it up for a little bit. So that was Alpha 1. Now let's jump to the next slide. Things change a lot going into Alpha. This is Alpha 4. I would argue, okay, so look at all the gray that's on the sheet. Looks good. Or I guess the gray, the contrast looks good, except a little bit difficult to write on with pencil. Fine for like a fillable sheet, but it wasn't really functional when you're trying to print it out. And a lot of our testing took place live, like at an actual table. So move it forward, remove a lot of the gray, and you'll see that some of the sections in the middle are kind of, there's 4 main boxes that was meant to like put your weapons, put your abilities, the main stuff that you use. That way it's always accessible, super easy to look at. It ended up being, I think, a little bit ugly and a little bit cumbersome, but that ends up changing a little bit later on. We also add a quick reference table there in the lower right-hand corner, which was meant to, for people who are new to the game, they jump in, they can see what does what. Like, okay, how do I hide? Well, the rules are there. What happens when I what's my turn economy? Okay, everything that you can do in a turn is here. So I think that was helpful, but it's a little bit obnoxious when you've already learned the game, because then it's just dead space. So, and this is also the design that I built the quick start characters on as well. It's a little bit more tailored, but then move on. This is Alpha 5. This is the current version, the one that you see now if you were to download the game. A little bit of cleanup, a little bit more contrast added back in to help you like visually group things. Plus, it just looks cool to have that gray line in the middle. And just a quick reference, like before, after, before, after. I ended up removing some of the quick reference details because it was like a lot of rules. It was taking up too much space. So the additional abilities box got extended a little bit, and again, just like some cleanup. Looking pretty okay. However, moving into the next
drum roll.
Yeah, okay. The next, also very different. So
very
everything
different.
was basically, yeah, very, very, very different. Everything was reorganized. So you have that header at the top, which honestly just makes the thing feel a little bit more official, I guess. And let me try to expand it just a wee bit here. Nope, that's not what happens. Okay. Let me get rid of our faces. So a few different things happen in this particular sheet. The abilities continue to be packaged. So you have those 4 sections. They just look a little bit cleaner. So instead of the ugly, 4 here in the middle where there's like little bubbles, kind of, we streamline it a little bit. The big thing that changed though is that backgrounds get pushed to the front page. So at the top right, you'll see I grew up, then enter your prompt, and my days were spent prompt. I became prompt the day prompt. This is so that you can. It was one of the biggest points of feedback that I got from the character sheets from just various sources and discords. Backgrounds felt like such a prominent part of the game that it'd be really nice to be able to sit down, look at your character sheet, after spending a week, 2 weeks, a month off of playing, and be able to like realign yourself with what your character is and kind of what they've gone through. So it's a way to kind of like help get you back into the mindset of playing the game. And then the other thing that changed is that the quick start, or the rules actually ended up on the second page, so it didn't just take up a bunch of space. And then your combat proficiencies came back to the front page, since just the order of operations, you're doing all the proficiency stuff at the same time. So it kind of made sense to just like bring it back, even though you don't really reference them that often, and that's part of one of the reasons why they're at the bottom. But
Do
that's
you
it.
have?
Yeah.
Do you have the second page?
I don't.
Visible?
So
No,
if you
not ready.
wanted to,
Not prepared.
it's just not. Not in this particular slideshow. But
Yeah, no, that's okay. Because Crabsoft asked how many of the sheets I tried and which one I liked the best, and I tried all but the last two. Well, obviously, because Alpha Packet 6 isn't even out yet. But the thing that I liked the best was, and I've mentioned this before, is the progression tracker page, because this is something that I've always, like, every time I start a new character, or every time I get to, why am I so big? Every time I get to roughly, like, maybe level 5 or whatever, I start questioning how I did the math on my stats, and then I start trying to backtrack and figure out, like, did I actually remember to do everything? Maybe it's just because ADHD, but I I start to question whether or not I did stuff right. So the progression tracker, having that as a supplemental sheet that just reminds you of the choices that you made and went through, I think is really good. And then the other thing that I've always done, um, almost always done as a supplement, is ended up, especially with spellcasters that have a lot of spells, I end up having like my list by level, but then also by spell level, but then also having another list organized by like offensive spells, defensive spells, and like other things that I would probably use out of combat. So on that second page where you have that reference guide, I don't know if there's space for people just to organize and like remind yourself what to do in what situation, because that's always one of the most challenging things, is like you get excited about having all of these different options for your character, but then situationally it can be hard to remember when to use them and all the different options that you have. So this really, there's a lot of things, like even when we go to look at the monsters as part of the preview for the Alpha 6 packet, like you set those up with different options of trying to get people to think outside of the box of like, I hit it with stick, and so if you're trying to play your character more creatively, or use the environment, or go more into the support spells, those types of things, it can be helpful to have things organized in a way that reminds you that you do have options beyond just damage.
For sure. I think one of the challenges of a like character sheet design, you've seen how many iterations it goes through, is just figuring out what's important to different people. And I
Yeah,
think
that's why
that's
there's
part of the
90 million planners out there, is because everybody's brain works different. So,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And even just like the different character sheets that Dungeons and Dragons, people create for Dungeons and Dragons, is because we all play it a little bit differently, and we all like, when was the last time you touched the flaws, bonds, and whatever else
Oh, yeah.
in D&D? Like, some people don't ever. So like you don't necessarily need that taking up space on a character sheet, but other campaigns I'm sure make some good use of it. I think we are. So that was a fun little preview.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what I don't know if there's some way to work that in to that second page, that, like, I don't know, like just thinking about, I don't know, just options, some way to get people to think about and remember their options, just like you've been doing with the quick reference guide. That's essentially what that is. It's like, hey, remember you can hide, remember that you could do these things. You have
Right.
multiple different options on your turn. Eh.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's
The
just
quick,
a beginner page or something.
maybe. Yeah. The quick reference guide is still going to be on the second page.
Yeah,
So
no, that
you'll,
makes sense. Because,
yeah, you'll reference it like kind of, yeah, it'll be right beneath your character sheet. So like pull it up
yeah, and
to
if you don't
reference
need
it or
it
whatever.
anymore, then you just don't use it. But
Right.
having it kind of as an optional, like the progression tracker, there's probably plenty of people out there that are like, I don't need that. Like Crabsoft got it, but it's relatable. But there's other people that just don't need that don't have that issue. So then you just don't use that page. Just like,
Right.
like Pathfinder, there's like 4 pages and you really only use one or two of them for the most part, unless you have a specific kind of character.
Well, and VTTs matter a lot too. Like, or being able to use third party app like D&D Beyond. It's like I don't need to remember nothing. It's just I just click some buttons and then can navigate everything pretty quickly. So, I mean, and if we ever get to that point, I'm sure we'll have more discussions on like how to figure out what or how to make something feel prominent, important, accessible, based on the style of play that people are going to engage with for Distal. But maybe VTT stuff later. Okay.
All right, so Alpha 6.
Yeah.
You published a sneak peek with the monster stuff. I think the behavior things is really fun. Also, adds to the story.
Yes. Yeah.
Rel's audio is 50% of Stephanie's. That's because Rel talks at 50% of Stephanie.
It's that much is true. I would have to eat my microphone
Yeah.
to compete.
And I would have to put mine across the room. Sorry. I'm loud. I'm working
That's
on
true.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that everybody got it for clarity. Okay, so what are we going to move on to? Originally was going to talk about some of the reformatting work that has been done for the cantrip section and just like Alpha 6 in general. But I think I might put that up as an update, and then hopefully ask you all to take a look at it because it's pretty dope. The visual formatting of Alpha 6 is going to be head and shoulders above what it is in Alpha 5. So it'll be a good place to last alpha to end on.
Nice. Did you want to talk about the monster behaviors thing at all? I think it's cool.
Yeah, sure. Let's bounce into that. So I don't
And
have
I don't
any.
know. I mean, I guess monsters in D&D do it too, but it feels different.
Right. It does feel a little bit different. So there are ways to so to back up. In Distal, each monster has 4 to 6 different behaviors. Very rare for a monster to have 6 behaviors. But so each monster has their attacks and their abilities and that sort of thing basically have 4 different options. And you like if you're a GM that is just like asking yourself what would the creature do, you just roll it. If you're kind of like trying to figure out what they could do, you can roll it, or you can pick from that list of behaviors.
Oh, I like that option of rolling, because there are definitely times where I'm like, I know what the enemy should do, but I don't want to hurt my players any more than they're already hurt. So I
That's a
kind
good
of
point.
like, yeah, that it gives you the option to randomize, so it's not personal.
That's a really good point. I was thinking, so Distal doesn't have like a confused state, but I was thinking that like if they did, you would just force the roll instead of making it as an option.
And now, I think monsters are brand new, right? I was just checking the Alpha 5, and monsters aren't in there yet, right? So this is like a whole new thing coming?
Or rather, no. The
Or is it a
monsters
supplement?
are. Wait. No, monsters
Oh,
are
no,
they're
I
all
see
the
them.
way.
Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, so they're definitely there. The behaviors are there as well. Done a
Oh,
number of
the formatting's
uh,
definitely way better. I think that's part of why I miss them.
yeah. Okay, so each monster has a number of behaviors that they go through. The first of which is typically just like the most standard attack for that monster that you can come up with, and and then there's usually like ability or behaviors that kind of build off of that, or can play with against like multiple monsters. So, for example, we have wolves in the game called bow wolves, and it's a monster stat block. That their first attack is like, okay, if you attack, deal some damage like you'd expect. But if there's an ally, like another wolf next to your target, then the target becomes pinned. And just that small little adjustment, it's just like, oh yeah, no, if there's an ally here, something else happens. Makes it so you can, as a GM, use multiples of the same type of monster and still make a combat interesting, like and not feel bad about doing that. So when you look at Dungeons and Dragons, some of the prevailing advice is like use 3 different types of monsters so that you can create a varied and interesting encounter. Behaviors kind of help you circumvent some of that a little bit by allowing monsters to have multiple different things that like distinctly different ways to interact with the battlefield, and then they're designed in such a way, for the most part, to interact with multiples of the same type of monster. If you have a bunch of creeping vines, just as an example, one of them will like grab the target, and then the other one, like if that target is grabbed, if it does this other ability, like it'll restrain them, and they can it kind of like dogpile, on, or they'll pull you around the battlefield and like away from your teammates and stuff. So it kind of it allows me to like inject feeling, like thematic feeling, to each individual monster, give them a purpose for being, instead of like, okay, well this monster, like, it needs to have an attack and we need to have stats for it. We need to like, and it's just like fodder. There's a lot of that stuff in D&D where it's just their stat blocks with no real express purpose or an experience that they're trying to provide. Distal is different in that way, where it tries to create an experience with every single monster stat block.
Yeah, and I could absolutely see that. Like even just you mentioned the bow wolf, and
Mm-hmm.
I could see how you could have, so it's got its attack, and then there's feral baying, which causes has the effect of encumbering players, and then there's stalk, which lets them hide, and then pack work, which you mentioned, which like pulls an ally bow wolf in. So I could see where you could have like one skirting around the edges doing the baying thing, and like trying to harry and like mess up the party while there's another one attacking, and and you could have like the pack leader or whatever, it keeps like pulling allies in. It's just it does create kind of a fun little uh chessboard that you can you know have them all play off of each other in an interesting way.
Yeah, for sure. Even like, so you mentioned the feral baying. Uh, One wolf doing it encumbers people. The next wolf, like for targets that are already encumbered, they get, I think, slowed after that,
Yep.
or
Yeah, it
and
says pinned
then
targets becomes, or encumbered targets become pinned targets become slowed.
right. So if there's a bunch of wolves howling, it becomes increasingly terrifying.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot of play with just individual monsters, and again, like use a single monster, make the encounter super interesting at the same time. Very difficult to do that with some of the generic stat blocks in D&D.
Yeah, and I feel like it inspires creativity in
Yeah,
a different
for
way
sure.
than it shows up in D&D on both sides, because now we're talking for the GM. The
Right.
player's
Yep.
never going to do this. So now the GM has kind of this stuff that's not telling them what to do. It's just giving them just enough options to let it be interesting and feel unique without it being off the rails. Because if
Right.
you make it too wide open, then you never know what your GM's gonna do, and there's varying level of skill sets and skill in the GM. So I think it's the right balance.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. That's a fun idea, Henry.
Yeah, I guess it does it. No, it is kind of cool. Yeah.
Let's see. Should we
Yeah.
move on
Oh,
to?
and then
I
the other
think.
thing. So you said you're gonna do a post about the cantrips thing rather than talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to show off some of the formatting uh, that's being done between like monsters and cantrips and that sort of thing. But I have a little image full of all the cantrips, and I'm interested in hearing what your ideas are. Like, what would you like to see in the game? Cantrips are they're easy to cast. There's no cost. They're functionally useful, and tend not to have any combat applications at all. And because of that, like if you follow those three guidelines, then the next question that you have to ask yourself is like, wouldn't it be cool if, insert whatever, and start there. So I would look for, I'll put the post up on BackerKit, and if you can jump in, write a comment if you have any ideas, something that you'd like to see in the game. Just start with the wouldn't it be cool if, and then we'll take it from there. Like I can translate that sort of stuff into mechanics. We'll see what shakes out. Let your creativity flow.
Oh, so what's next up for the campaign?
So next week is going to be the last live stream. That is
Woohoo.
going to start at 7 EDT. Maybe. I have to check the time again. But I'm a professional again. So that'll be the last day for the campaign. So we are officially, as of today, 1 week out from campaign end. Have not funded the campaign yet. Like it is, or rather the BackerKit has not reached full funding. That's totally fine. It will, like none of the money comes out of your pocket. There's no risk to actually making a pledge. However, it would be really nice to try to get all the art for the books. The books are going to be so cool if it actually happens. So I'm hoping to still hit that mark, but we'll see. I'm knocking on doors and stuff to see if there's a try to extend my reach. But that being said, if the game doesn't reach BackerKit, we might have, or doesn't reach funding, then we'll have to have some discussions about, not even discussions. There will need to be some game plan about what to do with Distal moving forward. And I think that I would personally love to keep building it out. However, real life is the thing that stands in the way, where I'm going to need to jump back into the job market and be able to pay my bills. And then based on how I tend to work, I don't know. I really hope that I have time and like attention span for Distal. It's very difficult for me to juggle projects that I'm passionate about. So, yeah, I mean, the game might end up getting completed later on down the line and just end up on itch.io, for purchase or download or that sort of thing. But it's the art mainly that is the big financial burden to getting like a proper book and just completed game out the door. That's where we live. That's where we live
Cool.
right now. So tell your friends. Tell your friends. Try to get more pledges to the door. And if you think that anybody would have an interest in the style of game, you just heard me spout off about it for the past hour, let them know.
Awesome. Yeah. And I have 6 o'clock on my calendar for next week's stream. I don't know if that's
Okay. So I think that's it.
yeah.
If it's on your calendar, it's probably correct.
So yeah,
Cool.
6 o'clock Eastern.
Word.
And you were just gonna go until
yeah, so the goal would be to keep streaming so long as pledges are coming in. So BackerKit does this really cool thing where there's like overtime. So for every time a pledge comes through, the clock gets extended by 10 minutes. So if there is enough excitement and interest, then we'll just keep streaming. But let's see. See how that goes. All right, folks.
Cool,
Thank you
cool,
very much
cool.
for hanging out. See you next week.
Bye, y'all.